right? I think Professor Srinath is incubating quite a few projects. So potentially you'll have Unipreneur come out of his organization. I think the question is about how do we create a new breed of thinking engineers. So as I love to do, tell stories. Right? So we'll talk about Mike Pierce to begin with, right? Mike Pierce was an architect, and he was in the city of Harare, Zimbabwe, and he was given a target of building in the sweltering heat of Zimbabwe a building, okay? A high-rise building, and he was given a simple target. It has to be this and that and all this stuff, but it should not have any air conditioning. Okay? 40 degrees heat, no air conditioning acceptable. Mike Pierce also was a traveler, right? He also had an interest in insects. Okay? And so what he did was, accidentally, through his journey and his knowledge of or interest in insects, he came across this giant termite hill. Okay? And he was wondering, 40 degrees, how do these ants survive? Okay? And he studied it. Turns out that the surface of the ant hill is around 40 degrees, but inside it's around 25. Right? Almost a 10 to 15 degree delta between the top and the bottom. Right? And he went into a little bit of more studies and realized how clever these ants are. They were able to channel cold air through wet mud to get inside, and then the hot air is exited from the top. Right? Through clever channels of air, which they kept opening and closing, and able to generate a nice stream within the ant hill. He went on to build this building without air conditioning, and it's one of the landmark case studies in architecture where you don't use air conditioning but you still cool the building. And he got 90% energy efficiency. 90%. Right? That's 90% of your bills. Right? What am I trying to tell here? You take an architect, you take an interest in insects, and you come across a solution in the building civil world. Right? Another story. I'm going to be telling stories here, so just to keep all of you entertained and also myself. Alfred Moser lived in the slums of Sao Paulo, Brazil. Right? And as with a country like Brazil, you had a lot of challenges, poverty, and you also had no electricity. So you had this big set of slums in blazing hot sun. The insides of these slums were dark, right? In broad daylight, because there's all over the place, you have to cover it, it's hot, and the entire thing was out there. So he chanced upon some study with his friend, and he built a simple solution. He took an empty Coca-Cola bottle, filled it up with water, and a little bit of anti-bacterial thing, and he drilled a hole in the top of the slum and put the Coca-Cola bottle. And in daytime, it gave an equivalent of 60 watts electricity. Right? You can read up on this. It's become a movement now in most areas where they're actually selling tiles with a built-in Coca-Cola bottle, okay, to generate this electricity or the equivalent of an electricity. This concept of multiple intersections intersections is called as the Medici effect. Right? I think as students, as entrepreneurs, you should study the Medici effect. Medici were a family in Italy, in Florence, right? A rich family long ago. And their business was thriving, they were bankers, and they also were very passionate about art and uh, about paintings, about sculptures, and they were funding a lot of these folks. Because they were funding a lot of folks, people came from multiple destinations worldwide to seek their funds so that they can take something back and do something with it. And because a lot of people came to Florence, they started exchanging ideas. Right? I came from Japan, I came from the United Kingdom, probably from India. I do it this way, how do you do it? Right? And they started exchanging ideas. And this triggered what is now popularly known as the Renaissance period in Europe. This was the trigger, okay? The Medici family. And Florence was the birthplace of the Renaissance. Who are the artists who came out of that place? Michelangelo, okay? And many others of his genre. So this is what happens when you get people from different cultures, experiences, environment, and you put them together, right? You get a cross-pollination of ideas, you get a cross-pollination of thoughts, right? And you get a lot of experience that you would not have had if you were by yourself. Right? So more stories. So this is about intersections. So I just talked about the Medici effect, which is about intersections. And it is very important that you do not sit in one place. No, you have to be at the intersection of disciplines, at the intersection of industry and experience how things work, so that you learn and new ideas will develop. Battle of Tarantino. Right? What is curious about the Battle of Tarantino? This was what triggered the Pearl Harbor attack in World War. Okay? So the Battle of Tarantino is a small event that happened again with Italy, where there was an attack, and in shallow waters they did a torpedo from another ship. This was the first time it was done. Now this information was studied by the Japanese. Right? People heard about this. So Japan sent a delegation to study how the Battle of Tarantino happened. How did they look at torpedoing ships in shallow water? Right? If you study torpedoes, you need some amount of water, and you cannot do it in shallow water because it will sink. It will settle. It will not have impact. So they studied it. The same thing was also studied by the Americans. Right? The Americans studied it, ignored it. The Japanese studied it, and in 6 months or 9 months, they attacked Pearl Harbor by using the knowledge of the Battle of Tarantino. They modified their torpedoes with wooden fins. They looked at shallow water destruction, and they did ship-to-ship warfare. I'll talk about why I'm telling all this in a minute. Jon Snow and the Dagger. Right? Again, if people are very curious, you should read stories, because these help a lot in trying to understand how ideas are generated. Jon Snow was the person who discovered what causes cholera. Right? People looked at cholera as an airborne disease and spent a lot of time trying to get people out of air, right? Separate people, because they thought air was causing But Johnson was finding a contradiction. So he conducted experiments. He isolated people and put them in a different room, made sure there was no air that is common between people. They still got cholera, right? Then he looked at, started investigating deeper. He started going into depth. And then he realized it could be the water. Despite people separated out, the water was what was causing it. And he dug deeper and deeper and found out that one infected infant whose diaper was soiled, and the mother washed the diaper in a common washing area, and that seeped into the water supply directly below the cleaning area where there were cracks in the plumbing. And that was the reason. Right? Otherwise, if it was not for John Snow, people would have thought it was still airborne. This one is something that you are already aware of. The theory of evolution was discovered I wouldn't say discovered, was noticed by Darwin because of multiple situations. He had an interest, right? And he was wanting to do something different, but he was not able to get an opportunity. He offered to work for free. Because he was working for free, somebody said, come with me on my ship. I need a free hand, I can't pay you. And he took them to the Galapagos Islands, and he started observing how these species were different on different islands, and he came up with the theory of evolution, right? Process of elimination, survival of the fittest, and all these procedures. This is something the university guys should know about. Russell Rowe. He's the guy who discovered transistors accidentally. So he was working with some silicon, and he noticed that the silicon had a crack. Okay? And when he was experimenting with the silicon, he saw that energy was passing through the crack, right, at certain energies. And then he went on to discover or invent the transistor and the diode, and he's also again curiosity led into this. And of course Einstein sat and thought about light beams. What if I traveled at the speed of light? What if another beam traveled with me? What if I had a flashlight while I'm on the light beam and switched on the flashlight? Would it travel faster than me, slower than me? So he was just in his room hypothesizing and dreaming about all these things, and he came up with the theory of relativity, right? The key here is everybody had the information that I showed here. Everybody knew about the disease, about cholera. Everybody two people knew about the Battle of Tarantino, right? A lot of people knew about light beams, right? Newtonian physics was also active there. Everybody knew about birds and the Galapagos Islands. But what was the difference? Right? Was connecting the dots. Right? It is very important to know that everybody in this room can have the same information, but the person who is able to connect the dots, right, is the one who gets the idea. Right? And the most important thing about being an entrepreneur or an unipreneur is what is it that will make you connect the dots. Right? Ideas do not come out of thin air. Ideas come out of connecting the dots, right? Making the effort, putting in the hard work, and being very much on the lookout for coincidences, being on the lookout for connections, being on the lookout for curious changes, right? And looking for contradictions. Like for example, the transistor theory. It was contradicting the whole concept of current flow, right? There's a crack in the silicon, but you still were able to pass current. How is that possible? Right? It was a contradiction. And of course, the last two is something that comes with you, right? in the commitment and put in the hard work. So if you study all the famous folks who discovered stuff, who invented stuff, who built new stuff, right? They always wondered about things, right? They always tried to connect the dots. They always asked the tough questions, and they always did not accept an easy answer, right? They pushed very hard and said, this doesn't make sense. I see a pattern. This, I'm puzzled. This shouldn't happen, right? I don't seem to understand this. And they dug deeper and deeper and deeper, and they came out with solutions. And for that, it is very important that you have a culture within the organization. This, by the way, these three things is what we do at Bosch. Okay? We have a 3-tier approach